Hi my gardening angels, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am Jess, and today we are going to be doing kind of a succulent seed question and answer. So starting succulents from seed, growing succulents from seed, all of the above. So this is going to be probably a long and wordy video. I probably won't show you too much, but I hope that it's super informational for you guys. And if you have any more questions that come up that I might have covered, or if you have anything else that you just think of, comment them down on this video and I will try to answer them in the next update that I have for the succulent seeds. So I'm going to make myself a cup of tea. This is from my SIPSBY January box, and it is a white peach oolong tea. So I'm going to be making some of that. Go ahead, pause this video, go grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea or hot chocolate or something, and come back so that you can, and get ready to take some notes if you're planning on starting your own succulents from seed. I have my full notebook here. I've gotten a lot of questions and I made a lot of notes. So let's just start going through them since this is going to be kind of a long video. So the first question is, how often do I water and how do I water? So, and I think this got cut out of my first video because I know I talked about it, but I must have deleted it on accident when I was editing. But so this is our seed container here. I have 2 of them currently. I'm hoping to start more. I just need to actually turn on my grow light. But in the seed starting video, which if you haven't checked out, I will include a link down in the description box. So go watch that one first because that will answer a lot of these questions on the setup process. But so this is our succulent seeds. We made little slits in the bottom if you remember from that video. And so what I do is I water from those slits, and so I will fill my sink up with about 1 inch or 2 inches of water, and then I will just set this container down in that with my other containers, and the water will suck up from the outside water through those slits and up through the sand to the plants. And so they kind of do that like capillary action that soil or sand or these mediums have. And so that's how you keep this watered. And I recommend watering from the bottom about once a week. So one of the comments that I got is, do you let them dry out in between, certain things like that? And I don't, not when they're succulent babies. It's kind of opposite of taking care of succulent adults. So with all of my other succulents, I completely let them dry out almost to the point where the plant is wrinkly and barely alive, and then I water them. And you want to do that because succulents are very rot happy, so they tend to rot very easily. So I always do that. But with succulent babies, I do not. So I constantly leave them as saturated as possible. You can see how much humidity is in this container. You can see the condensation along the edges. I constantly leave it like that, and I try really hard not to actually open up my container until the seedlings are fairly large in size, and that is because I want everything to stay nice and wet in here, and the succulents don't have very much water in them, and so if the soil dries out or the sand dries out really quickly, your baby cactus or succulents are going to dry out really quickly as well because they don't have much of that reserve of water in them. So I really try to leave my succulents in here for a fairly long time, and that can be months before I really leave the lid off consistently. Of course, you can open it to check on them because they're really cute to look at and stuff and take pictures of, but put the lid back on after you're done doing that. So then one of the other questions is, do I spritz them at all? And I do not. I don't know if there's necessarily a rhyme or reason to it, but I feel like the sand stays wet sufficiently fine from the bottom watering, and I don't like adding any unnecessary water droplets onto the actual leaves themselves. I know that I said that it's pretty humid in here as it is, but if our rosettes start to form and they have water droplets sitting kind of in this rosette, they can tend to rot. And so I haven't had that issue with succulent seeds, but like I said, I just kind of leave my lid on it and I just have it sitting like this on the shelf unit for months at a time, and then I just water from the bottom and I don't really open it up, so I don't spritz it. I don't know if it would really harm the plants any, but I personally just don't ever spritz them other than when I'm first planting the seeds and I'm trying to make them settle into the sand or soil itself. And then somebody asked also if I ever water from the top or when I can start watering from the top instead of watering from the bottom. And I personally don't actually ever water my succulents from the top really, unless they're in a container that doesn't have a drainage hole. All of my succulents are on a shelf together, and a lot of them are in nursery pots, and I actually just pour water into the massive tray that they all sit in, and they all soak up water from the bottom as well. So there's only a few pots that I even water from the top, but essentially when you transplant the seed, when it's big enough for the seedling to be transplanted into its own container, that's when I would say you can start watering from the top. If you watered from the top on here, they're just so little that if you have any sort of, you know, forceful pour, it can move your seedlings around, if that makes sense. So then another question was, how do you get succulent seeds? Where do you purchase them from? How do you source them? That sort of thing. You can of course harvest them yourself. So if you have a large succulent collection or interesting plants that you want to try to cross-pollinate, you know, crossbreed, whatever, you can harvest them yourself. It's very similar to harvesting any other type of flower seeds. So succulents will flower on their own, and then once they get pollinated, they will dry out, and you can collect those seed pods the dried out flowers from them, and those will be where your seeds are. And then you can plant them just like I'm doing now. I personally don't get succulents to flower continuously or, you know, at a designated time, and so since my succulents stay inside all year round, they don't really flower unless there's a weird, you know, unless they feel like it really. I don't know what the science is behind when my succulents flower, but I don't ever collect the seeds on my own. So I purchase them online, and I will include a link down to that below. But the first thing I want you to do before you're going to go purchase them online is please go watch my how to not get scammed when watching succulents, or when you're purchasing succulents from seed video, because there are a lot of people out there that will sell you weeds and dust and nothing, and they'll make a profit on it because you might not be the wiser of what you're actually purchasing, and by the time that your succulents actually grow into anything, you can't return it. So go watch that video, please, before you purchase anything. And reviews, you can't really trust those either. A lot of people review products based on whether or not they even arrived at their house, which should not be what your reviews are on. So if you are going to look at the reviews, just please read them and make sure that they actually turned into succulents. If you just see a lot of reviews about they arrived, I'm so excited to try them, those sort of things, don't trust the source unless you can confirm that somebody actually was able to grow succulents of the variety that you bought. But otherwise, I'll include a link down below to the place I like to buy from, which is rareplant.me. So then that leads us into our next question, which is how long do I have to plant them while they're still, like, how long are they still viable? And so when you're reading the instructions on, you know, from the growers and sellers themselves, of the succulent seeds, a lot of them say, you know, the fresher the better. So as soon as you get them would be most ideal to plant them for the most successful germination rate. But with like all seeds, you know, they will hold up for a little bit, but they will have a worse germination rate or less successful germination rate the longer that you store them. So I would say you could probably get away with several months really easily and still have a really great germination rate. You know, I waited 4 months after purchasing mine, after they got here. It took 2 months for them to get here, and then I waited an extra 4 months, and I had a really great germination rate with one of them so far. I don't have germination on my other ones yet, but like I said in that other video, you know, it's only been a few weeks and it can take months for these guys to germinate, so I'm staying with it. But you know, the sooner that you can get them going is probably going to be the best, but I would probably say about a year you would want to try to plant them before they actually reach about a year. So how big can they be before you remove the lid? So I kind of talked about this already, but you know, you really want to make sure that your succulents have a lot of water already stored up in them. So I like to wait until I can be comfortable that with my soil being dry for a day, a week, you know, consistently dry, that my succulent's not going to suffer because of that. I like to shoot for about the size of my pinky nail, and I know that a lot of people that's going to be very different for, but you know, a dime would probably be preferred, but you know, you can wait for a little bit. I would say that these little guys are still a little bit too small, or the size of like a pencil eraser would be probably a good size where you could take off their lid. But you do still need to make sure that you're watering consistently. So every time that it does dry out, make sure that you're watering, just so that those little babies can make sure that they're holding on to their water storage. Yeah. So how big before you can transplant? So you can take off the lid about that size. Technically you can transplant them whenever, but the caveat here is that the roots are going to be really fragile, and so you can break them off really easily. And if you do break them off, your succulent might have a really hard time growing them back. So you have to make sure that they're big enough to be able to take a little bit of roughness. But if you do need to move them for whatever reason, so the container's just not working like the way you wanted it to, or maybe they're too crowded, maybe all the seeds were in the same spot, you can move them. I would just recommend going really slow, taking your time, trying to contain the soil that's around that seedling itself, and moving the whole unit. Don't just grab the seedling and pull it up. I don't know if it would survive. There was another question about how long it takes for succulents to germinate. So I know I talked about this a little bit on the last video, and it can take as little as 1 to 2 weeks, which is what some of my succulents did. I think they germinated in a week, so that was awesome. But it can also take up to 3 months. So make sure that you kind of just stick with your conditions. You make sure that they have a humid environment, a warm environment, lots of light. Make sure that they're not buried, and you should be able to get your best results that way. But you do have to be very patient, and so succulents can take a very long time to germinate, and so the more that you can know about your specific variety, the better. I know that there are specific varieties that take that long. I can't remember where or what site I was on that I read that for certain varieties, but they can take that long. And you don't want to let them dry out during their germination process, because then that can stunt their growth and pretty much ruin them. So just be very patient. This takes a long time. Thankfully, this doesn't take up much space, and you don't have to be tending to it all that often. You just have to make sure that it stays consistently, watered, essentially. And so it's not very much work on your end. It just takes a lot of time. So then there's the next question, which is how long are my grow lights on for? And I have my grow light set to be on for 8 hours a day. My seedlings are about 1 foot away from the grow light themselves. Sorry, my grow light's over there if you're wondering. I just keep looking at it. But you can have your grow light on anywhere from 8 to 16 hours. 12 is probably ideal, but 8 has been very sufficient for me, and I'm all about not having to have it on for more than necessary. So I've been getting along with 8. So then there's another question of what is the time of year that is best to start these. And honestly, if you have a warm and well-lit indoor spot, you can start these at any time. I don't recommend starting succulent seeds outside anyway, so I like to go off of any time of the year, as long as you have the right conditions though. So let me preface this a little bit. I have very specific conditions in my grow room because I have a grow light and it stays warm in here, and I know that my house stays fairly warm in the room that I'm in, and so we have great temperature control, and I'm not using the window as my light source. So I say that because if you are in the middle of winter, especially somewhere where you actually get a winter and snow and coldness, and if your plan is to set your succulent seeds in a windowsill, just make sure that you have a very well insulated house or something, because you really don't want to let your succulent seeds drop probably below 60 degrees unless that specific seller says otherwise. And there are some succulents that want to be colder, but unless as kind of a general rule of thumb, succulents do like to keep it warm, and so you don't want to kind of shock them with the cold either. So just make sure that wherever you do put them has a good temperature control set, and so you're not fluctuating greatly between temperatures of being really warm when they're in the sun and then freezing at night. But as long as you have a warm, well lit area in your house, you should be just fine to start them whenever. I'm sure typically they start in spring, who knows, but I haven't done as much research on it because I just follow because I just grow whenever I want to. But you could do some more research if you wanted to try to grow them outside. If you live somewhere super nice and warm all the time, maybe you can do that. And then I would look, you know, specifically more to when the ideal temperatures would be, because you also don't want to have it be scorching hot either. So I just like that, you know, probably a spring range is what any plant's probably looking for germination, but indoors, anytime you want. Then somebody asked, which is more delicate, succulents from seed or from leaf propagation? So seedlings are really fragile for a really long time. And so, I mean, I would probably say them, or at least their roots seem to be a little bit more fragile in my opinion. But again, I would only ever do seed propagation or grow by succulents from seed, because this is an extremely slow and painful process that requires a lot of patience. So I would only ever do this if it's a succulent that I do not have and cannot propagate on my own. So these are all succulents that I do not own, and they're also succulents that are rare, because if they only cost about $4 to $5 each, I'm just going to buy that and I'm going to propagate it. But I only buy succulents that would cost me a little bit more. I only buy them from seed for those reasons. So, you know, it's a kind of a different reasoning behind why I would grow them from seed versus leaf. And to answer the question, seeds are more fragile, and they're kind of, you know, the little babies of the succulent world. So then, but I guess it leads into their second question, which is, which method do I recommend? So, like I said, if it's a rare plant and it costs a lot of money, but you can find the seeds for it, great. Just buy the seeds and go through this process, because it will save you money in the end. It might take a while, but you might get like 14 of your plants. So that's great. But if it's one that I own and it blooms, I'm probably not going to take any seeds from it. Cutting is going to be the best, but the leaves are still faster than the seeds. So if you don't want to take a cutting, just take a leaf and it's still going to be faster than growing them from seed. Okay, and so that leads me to my very last piece, which is, do I have any tips for beginners? My biggest tip is, do not let your own fear stop you from trying this, because, you know, don't get all hung up on making sure you have the right soil medium and the right pot and the right conditions and XYZ. It doesn't have to be a perfect setup. Make sure that you have some of the key ones, you know, that you don't let it dry out, that it is getting light. You know, my first succulents that I grew from seed, I didn't have them under my grow light. I had them sitting in the windowsill. So you don't need perfect conditions in order to be successful with starting succulents from seed. So don't let the fear of making everything perfect, you have one shot, you know, whatever excuse you're using in your head, don't get hung up on that, because honestly, they'll probably still grow. Maybe they won't grow as fast, but at least you got to do it, and you're going to be better off starting them now than you are in 4 months, because in 4 months, you're going to have 4-month-old little babies, which are going to be cute and precious and succulents. So you might as well start them now. So the sooner you start, faster you get succulent babies, okay? Then my second is, leave your lid shut. As a beginner, I know you're going to want to watch your babies as much as possible, which is why I like having a clear lid like this. So I know that this will be very tempting to want to open, and you know, like I said, you can sure open it if you would like, but immediately put the lid back on. And I like the lids that seal, and I like the containers that are clear, because then you don't have to, the clear containers, you don't even have to open, you can see what's growing in them. So make sure you just leave your lid shut. Don't touch it. Just walk away. Have a reminder set somewhere on a phone or a planner or something to add water to your succulent babies, because you do not want to let them dry out, because it'll just ruin all your progress that you have gained so far. And then the last one is, please be patient with yourself and your plants, and don't expect a lot of growth right away. It's a very, 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 very slow, painful process, and you're going to be frustrated that you aren't getting any growth, or you might get frustrated that, you know, you see algae or mold or fungus or something growing in your pot. but just be patient. You never know. You know, I would just leave it be for as long as you can stand, because like I said, 3 months is a really long time, but that can be how long it can take for certain plants to germinate. So just leave it be. And you know, if it's not bothering you, if you don't need the space for something else right away, just leave it be. And you know, in a year, if it hasn't done anything, okay, then something happened. And it's probably not gonna do much, but otherwise just leave it. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, but I'm hoping that I answered a lot of your guys' questions that you had, and I hope that this will help make you more successful and more excited to go start your succulents from seed. And I will update you guys along the way of anything that I, you know, see. I will try to give you guys monthly updates at the minimum, and talk about the steps at each stage. I'll give you a little peek as to how these babies are doing. I've probably already seen it, but these are really the only ones that are doing much right now. So this is my Pharaoh cactus. Babies, actually, there is an Echeveria growing in here, so I lied. But I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to see them. Okay, so here is a close-up. Here are all of the little babies. Aren't those perfect? And then this one must have escaped sides. But this one right here, that's an Echeveria. It's just starting, but it's there. So then here's my other seeds. You can see that I do have, you know, some algae or something growing here. This is what we were trying to kind of ignore with the sterilization of the sand, but that's okay. You know, I don't really think it's harming much. It just makes it a little bit harder to see any babies. But I do have a few little somethings here. So here is one. You can see him kind of growing there. And then there's one directly behind him, but you can't really see it in this picture here. Right at the tip of my fingertip there. And I don't see any more on that side, but then on this side, I did just notice that there is a small little leafy green baby sprout coming up right here. And now I just ranted about how you're not supposed to take your lid off, and here I am taking my lid off, but I'll put it back on. So if you guys enjoyed this video and you would like to see more about the succulent seed starting series, please go ahead and click that like button, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of these future videos, and then like I said, comment any questions that you have down below. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.